What is Swedenborgianism? What is the Swedenborgian Church of North America? What is the new church that Swedenborg talks about? Are those the same? And isn't it weird, or maybe even a bit culty, for us to call ourselves Swedenborgians? After all, Swedenborg was very clear that he was carrying out a mission that he felt was divinely inspired, and he did not credit himself with it. In fact, he first published his stuff anonymously. He tried really hard, to not make this into another sect, another teaching, where people follow a leader as a person. He called himself a servant. And he did have somewhat of a narcissistic side that comes through in his works, especially his earlier works, but I think he was very intentional about fighting that part of himself. But anyways, there's been this really long debate among Swedenborgians from the very beginning, again, on what is the new church, what is its relation to the Swedenborgian movement, which of course emerged after Swedenborg's death. Swedenborg never started an organization. He never started a church. He never established any kind of sect. This was really not at all his idea or his mission. This is something that happened later when people were reading Swedenborg and they started getting in trouble for it, and figured they need to, start their own organizations, church organizations. So the concept of a Swedenborgian church, I believe, would be quite foreign, to Swedenborg himself. And there's this continued debate. It used to be a lot more prominent, but it's still a debate that I have witnessed and have had partaken in, on the term Swedenborgian and Swedenborgian church. And we've had this conversation here at Hillside versus new church. Isn't it weird to call yourself Swedenborgian church? Doesn't that give the impression that we believe Swedenborg is the second coming? I happen to firmly believe that from a doctrinal standpoint, Swedenborgian church is, in fact, a more appropriate term for our denomination as a specific religious tradition. Because Swedenborg, as I read him, is very clear that the new church is not an organization. The new church is a collective and an individual spiritual state that we can inhabit, that is open to us, that he felt he witnessed, but that didn't happen to him or through him. Swedenborg didn't experience the second coming of Christ for us, but he stood as a witness for a process that we are all invited to partake in. But then why do I believe so strongly that Swedenborgian church is appropriate? Isn't there maybe a third option? Maybe. Isn't there a paradox in wanting to de-emphasize Swedenborg and calling a church Swedenborgian? I personally think it's the opposite. And the late, great George Dole articulated this sentiment that I personally share in his usual very brilliant and witty way when he said, an organization calling itself the new church is like a recreational swimming team calling itself the Olympic champions. The term Swedenborgian, to me, actually indicates a sense of humility, an engagement with the human Emanuel Swedenborg, acknowledging that he is not the ultimate, that he is not the source. The new church is unfolding all around us. And if Swedenborg was right, the new church, the second coming of Christ, is a universal reality that fundamentally changed and is changing the spiritual dynamics of human life and our relationship with each other and the divine. And that's all of humanity. All of humanity. And I feel that we can see how this is happening all around us. While there's still so much work to do, as we all know, if we think about values that we associate with a new age, with a new church, which of course Swedenborg uses those terms, uses the term church to mean age or aeon, dispensation. If we believe in such values, really humanist values that Swedenborg espoused, rationality, human rights, equality, we've done a lot of progress. There's been a heck of a lot of progress. And I side with Steven Pinker in saying that while things are hard, the progress is undeniable. And that these ideas, while they haven't fully been realized, are worth fighting for and have had incredible success. Think about how uncommon, we can nitpick examples of exceptions to the rule, but if we're honest with ourselves, notions like female and male equality, true equality, participatory, actual participatory democracy, which the Greeks did not have. Slaves could not vote. Gender equality, once again. If you think about the reality, if you look at the Christian world compared to Swedenborg's day, the fact that these days in Western mainline Christianity, it is the norm to ordain females to the ministry. It is the norm among mainline Christianity in the United States to consecrate same-sex marriages. The notion of ecumenism, of working together rather than against each other, has exploded. At Swedenborg's time, churches within and outside of Christianity were so divided. And, so there has been unprecedented things that have happened. The notion that your own cultural and ethnic group is not superior to others. If you look closely at history, that's not a very common notion that we are all equal. It's just not. These are fairly new concepts in the sense of being espoused and realized on such a huge scale. So the new church is not an organization. By the way, I know that's a big can of worms, and some people would say we're worse off than before. I'm happy to have that conversation. But again, the new church is not an organization, and it is also not a Christian organization. In Heaven and Hell 308, Swedenborg writes, people are not part of the church merely by being born where the Word exists and where the Lord is known. People are part of the church if they are being regenerated by the Lord by means of truth from the words. That is, they are living lives of love. New Jerusalem, section 246. The church, like heaven, is within us as individuals. So the church in general is made up of people who have the church within themselves. Once again, the church, like heaven, is within us as individuals. So the church in general is made up of people who have the church within themselves. There is no church within us unless the truths we have been taught are grounded in good actions from a loving heart, and therefore grounded in the way we live. We as Swedenborgians, I think, can do our part in striving to carry the new church within ourselves and to realize and to manifest it around us through a life of radical love. But just like Swedenborg was a vessel, not a source, we as Swedenborgians can be vessels for the new church. And so can people who have never heard of the old Swede and have no need to, and people of all faith backgrounds. And in some areas, I actually feel like we as Swedenborgians need to catch up with the new church. And I'll end my reflection with Heaven and Hell 308. The Lord's church is everywhere and exists with everyone who acknowledges something divine and lives lovingly.